A week from, a little less than a week, we're going to be sitting around the table, Jews around the world with their families, and celebrating and commemorating the greatest event in the history of mankind, which is the Yetziat Mitzrayim, the leaving out of Egypt, and all the miracles that God performed for the Jewish nation. What's amazing is that Pesach, of all the holidays, I've noticed that when I was in Plainview, I vividly remember my second year as the rabbi there. Every Friday night, I would go back home, walking after Friday night prayers in synagogue. I would go home, and you would see a lot of the families watching TV, having a good time. Pesach night, I couldn't believe it. I knew that the population in Plainview, Long Island, is about 80% Jewish. You can't imagine. The majority of them are totally secular. There are children marrying non-Jews. It's a horrible churban going on in Plainview, the whole Long Island. And these are the people that 20, 30 years ago were running away from religion. And unfortunately now all the kids are intermarrying. But Pesach night, Passover night, when I was walking home, I saw the families were sitting together and they were celebrating Passover. And I couldn't believe it. Even the Reform, the conservative, a lot of things are gone, but the Passover night has remained. And this is the passing, at least for the religious people, the passing of the traditions and the customs to our children and grandchildren. This is the main point of the night, is for the kids and for the grandkids. And it's a tremendously important night. There's one message, one main lesson, I think, in all the stories of Pesach, Passover that we read. This lesson, I think, is of utmost importance. And the people that are here, I think they're going to walk away with, wow, like this is something amazing for me. All the years that I've read through many Devar Torahs, this was something incredible for me. And it's a very important lesson in life, how one could develop the trait of happiness, which everyone's looking for. Moshe Rabbeinu takes his father-in-law's flock, and he goes to the mountains where the grass is ownerless, so that the sheep could eat from ownerless grass. And sure enough, he sees a burning bush. To cut a long story short, God appears to him. God says, listen, you're going to be the Jewish Redeemer. You're going to take out all my children out of Egypt. Moshe's automatic response is, I'm not cut out for this. In his great humility, he keeps on refusing this mission. I can't do it, God. Hashem keeps on telling him, no, you're the one going. Every excuse Moshe has in the book, God has an answer for. Deep down, God knew that the main reason Moshe Rabbeinu did not want to go back is because we know that Moshe was missing in action. He left Egypt when Paro tried to kill him for about 65 years or so. And he was in Midian by his father-in-law's house. Who was the leading rabbi, the leading sage in Egypt was none other than Aharon, his own brother, his older brother. And Moshe felt that how could I go and take over his position? I'm going to hurt his feelings. And he said, God, I can't do it. God told him that, no, listen to me, he will see you. Not only externally will be happy for you that you're going to take over his position as the new rabbi, as the new leading sage, but even internally in his heart, he's going to rejoice, he's going to be happy for you. So eventually Moshe Rabbeinu runs out of excuses. He has one last request of God, and this request was, God, I need to ask permission from my father-in-law. So he went to every single excuse in the book. I can't speak, I have a stutter, hard for me it's going to be a mockery, it's a joke that I'm going to stand in front of Paro and I can't talk. Moshe Rabbeinu had a hard time speaking. You see people out there that have a stutter. I knew a few people throughout yeshiva, the years in yeshiva, they couldn't talk normally. The stutter is a tremendous impediment. And this is what Moshe Rabbeinu had since he was younger. All the excuses did not work. This last excuse, it wasn't really an excuse, it was a permission that he needed to go ask permission from his father-in-law. So as the Pasuk writes, that Moshe went and returned back to his father-in-law, and he says, please let me go. God has commanded me to go save my Jewish brother and sisters. And Yitro says, go ahead, I give you permission. Rashi clearly writes that what he was doing was asking for Yitro's permission, and Yitro says, yes, you could go, no problem. Now, you think about this, it sounds a little strange that Moshe is coming after God gave him a command to go save 3 million men, women, and children. God's telling him to go, and he comes along and says, I need to ask permission from my father-in-law. Why in the world, of all people, do you need to ask permission from your father-in-law? So Midrash writes something fascinating. This is one of the most wildest Midrashim I've ever seen. It says that he responds to God, Amar lo, Ribon ha'olam, Master of the universe, Eini yachol. I can't go yet. You took care of all the excuses in the book, but I still can't go. Why? Because I need to ask permission from my father-in-law. Why? Mipnei shekibalni, Yitro, because Yitro accepted me. When I was a refugee running away and my life was on the line, Patach li beito, he opened his door to me. I came into his house, he gave me food to eat, he gave me a place to sleep, and he gave me one of his own daughters in marriage. Umisho potach pitcho lechavero, a person who opens up his doors to his friend, nafsho chayav lo, he owes his life to him. A debt of hakarat hatov, a debt of gratitude. Apparently Moshe felt that he owes his life to Yitro, in a sense. When he was a refugee, he had a place to go. And hence, he had to ask permission from his father-in-law. And this time, God did not say, you're wrong, just go. He accepted his wishes, and he said, go ahead, ask permission from your father-in-law. This is the basic story. Sounds good? No questions?
Question. Why did he say that he wants to talk to his wife?
He what?
He wants to talk to his wife.
He wants to talk. Of course, that's a given. Anyone married, married more than a week knows that you can't do anything, especially anything major, without asking your wife's permission. That goes without saying. The Midrash did not need to even elaborate on that. I'm serious. I think that's it's a given. This religion, unlike a lot of people think, it's a partnership. So, the man is the man of the house, but it's a partnership. The concept of a lot of people think, unfortunately, a lot of the old school Persian mentality, that the man is the man of the house and he doesn't need to consult with his wife, that is foreign to the Torah perspective. It's a partnership, it's a marriage, the two people that together they have to make the decisions. Of course, any major decision has to be asked to one's spouse. There's no question about that. Here? So, I have a question to ask you. Here's Moshe. He says to God, I need to ask permission from my father-in-law. It's very clear from the Midrash that if his father-in-law would have said, don't go, Moshe Rabbeinu would not have gone. If you think about this, what's at stake, what's on the line, this is ludicrous. It's ridiculous. You're talking about Moshe Rabbeinu going and saving 3 million men, women, and children that are suffering. For the past 210 years, they've been suffering away. They reached the 49th level of tumah and complete impurity. A lot of the Jews were hopeless for them. He needs to save them. Their lives are on the line. People were dropping like flies, left and right. You talk about the mitzvah of saving one Jew. I want to ask you a question. Let's say the Arabs come along, this should never happen, and they capture a Jewish soldier. And they say, listen, the only way we return to you this Jewish soldier, if you give us a Sefer Torah. And you know that they're going to take the Sefer Torah and they're going to burn it. What is the halacha? Are you supposed to give the Sefer Torah to get that Jewish guy if you know they're going to burn the Sefer Torah? What's the halacha? No one knows the halacha? You give the Sefer Torah, right? Jewish soul. Now, what if it's not one Sefer Torah? They say we want 100 Sefer Torah, and they tell you we're going to make a huge bonfire, and we're going to have a party. We're going to burn every single one of them. For this soldier, what's the halacha? You do it. What if they say, we want every single Sefer Torah in the entire land of Israel. You're not going to have one Sefer Torah left. You're not going to be able to read the Torah on Monday, on Thursday, on Shabbat. You're not going to be able to read it. Now, one Sefer Torah left. What's the halacha? You sure? Not one Sefer Torah?
No, the Jewish soul is worth more than anything.
Good. The halacha is you give it. What if the soldier has 16 earrings on his nose and he has tattoos all over his body? He has a belly ring and an earring and he has all sorts of rings. People are very creative these days, coming up with new places to put rings and tattoos. What if a guy is a complete lowlife and he tattoos all over his body? What's the halacha? You still do it. Can you imagine? That's the value of a Jewish soul. Doesn't matter how religious or irreligious they are, how secular they are, still a Jew. You give all the Sefer Torahs in the world, no Torah reading, over, no shul this week. This week you could pray, but no Torah reading. Why? Because it's a Jewish soul. Here's Moshe Rabbeinu. He has the opportunity to save 3 million men, women, and children. It's not 1, it's not 100 soldiers, it's not 1,000, it's not 100,000. It's 3 million. This is the Jewish nation. And here he is, he's putting, everything's on the line. And he tells God that if my father-in-law says no, I can't go. Why? Because of Hakar Tov. Are you out of your mind? Gratitude? Look what's at stake. Look what's on the line. He's about to embark on the greatest mission in the history of mankind. After he redeems them, where is he about to take them? He knew he was about to lead them to Mount Sinai. 3,328 years ago, we received the Torah on Mount Sinai. This was the purpose of life. That Moshe Rabbeinu knew that he was going to take them out and lead them to the purpose of the existence of this world. If not for the Torah, writes the Gemara, the world would go back to nothing. This is the entire reason why the world exists nowadays. Moshe Rabbeinu is willing to give it this all up. And not only that, he's willing to give up this close relationship which he shared with God. Moshe went down in history as the greatest human being to ever live. The greatest prophet. Every single prophet in the world, whenever the Torah writes that God spoke to Abraham, people think that means that he actually spoke to them. That does not mean he spoke to Abraham. He means that it was some form of prophecy. The prophecy was certain cryptic messages or in some quasi-sleep state where they weren't all there. The only person to speak to God, to speak to him directly while awake and aware of what he's doing, was Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu only reached this level because he accepted this mission. He reached that higher level of being God's agent. Moshe was willing to give this up to go down in history as a little what? As a little shepherd. He would have continued his life. If his father-in-law would have said no, it is very clear he would have continued living his life as a simple shepherd and would have been a no-name, would have been a nobody. Why? Hakar Tov, gratitude. How can I not go ask permission from my father-in-law? I owe my life. He opened his doors to me. This is wild. To me, when I first heard this, I was blown away. The extent of Hakar Tov. And you don't think Yitro would even understand this? If I were Moshe, I would have sent a telegraph to Yitro saying, Pops, listen up. I'm sent on a mission by God to go save 3 million men, women, and children. You don't think Yitro would understand? Why does he feel he needs to ask his permission? You have everything on the line. It's one thing where you want to be nice, not so much on the line. You ask permission to be nice to your father-in-law. Here, everything is on the line. It doesn't make sense that he's asking permission, and let alone that he would not go if his father-in-law said no. But it's really even more than this. Who owes who a debt of gratitude? I dare argue that if anyone owes the other a debt of gratitude is Yitro to Moshe, not Moshe to Yitro, not Moshe to his father-in-law. I'll explain why. Torah is very clear that at this point, Yitro was in a ban. He was ostracized. The Pasuk writes that Yitro had 7 daughters, and his daughters were tending to the flock. Did you ever wonder why Yitro's daughter were taking care of this sheep? Why didn't he hire some minimum waged worker? I'm sure they had plenty of Egyptians and whatever back then. They would have been the minimum waged worker to take care of the flock. You know why? Rashi says why. Why is daughters taking care of them? Because he was in a ban. He was in nidui. He was excommunicated. You know what excommunicated means? There was a ban on him that no one should have anything to do with Yitro. No one deals in business with him. No one marries his daughter. Nothing. Why? Because he had officially renounced his service of Avodah Zarah. Yitro, the part of him, was a man of truth. In one lecture, hopefully, we discussed that. The importance of being honest in life. Honest to yourself. He went after every single Avodah Zarah in the world. Every single idol. He said they were all pointless. It doesn't make any sense. Eventually, he renounced. He gave up Avodah Zarah. And he was placed in a ban. He was ostracized that no one should have anything to do with Yitro. To the point that even he couldn't find someone to hire to tend to his flock, to take care of his sheep. Now, Yitro had 7 daughters. This poor guy had 7 daughters in the shidduch market. It's not a simple scene to marry off 7 daughters. He had no boys. Especially when there's a ban on you and no one wants to have anything to do with you. What's Yitro going to do? When he heard that Moshe came and he saved these 7 girls from people harassing them, the Pasuk writes that his daughters were getting harassed by the people because of this ban. It says that Moshe came, the strong, Moshe came and he chased them away and he helped them with the well and getting water. And they came back home and they told their father what happened. The father said, "Why did you leave this man? Go, run and find him and bring him to our house." And that's what they did. And he said, "Why? Bring him to our house so we could feed him. V'yochal lachem, he'll eat bread." Rashi says as a reference, maybe he'll marry one of you. This is how desperate the scene was over here. Moshe Rabbeinu was not, he was a pretty hot pick in the shidduch scene. He wasn't a desperate guy. Tall, dark, and handsome. Maybe he had a little bit of a stutter, but I think his qualities in other areas would make up for the stutter. He had everything, every trait that any girl wants. A husband who's giving, caring, the most humble human being to ever live. Who did who a favor? Was it Yitro who did Moshe a favor? Or you could argue, I think that it was really Moshe who did Yitro a favor by going into his house and marrying his daughters and taking care of his sheep and cattle. He's doing tremendous favor. And of all things, Moshe Rabbeinu is willing to give everything that's on the line. You have to understand, just think about it for a minute. Everything was on the line. Everything, all his level of spirituality, his ruchniut, his attachment to God, saving 3 million men, women, and children, that tremendous merit of saving Jewish lives, everything was on the line, yet Moshe Rabbeinu was willing to give it up. Well, I need to ask permission from my father-in-law. And if he would say, no, I can't go. How do we understand such a thing? Hakarat hatov. Hakarat hatov, feeling a debt of gratitude. There was about 15 years ago, I went to Rav Shach Zatzal. Many of you may have heard of his name, Rav Elazar Shach. Rav Shach was the leading sage in our generation. Back 15 years ago, living in Bnei Brak. Anyone who goes to Bnei Brak, I advise you to go check out the Panovich Yeshiva. It's the nicest yeshiva with a Aron Kodesh, huge, made out of gold, beautiful. And he was the Rosh Yeshiva. So he passed away 15 years ago. There was a gathering on his Shloshim on the 30th day after his passing in Kew Gardens. And Rav Aaron Feldman Shlita, the Rosh Yeshiva of Ner Yisrael, he drove down to Kew Gardens to address and a little bit eulogize about the life of Rav Shach. He said a story about Rav Shach I'll never forget. He said when Rav Shach, a few years before he passed away, he was well into his 90s. He learned Torah in his house. He was too weak to walk and go to the yeshiva. And one day his attendant, he had attended, that got a phone call. And they said, this is so-and-so, the family of so-and-so. He said, I want to let you know that please relate the message to Rav Shach that our mother has passed away and gave her name. And the guy says, Rav Shach is very old. It's very hard for him to walk. He's weak. He's sickly. Unfortunately, he can't come to the funeral. Said, okay, please just relate the message. The shamish, the attendant, comes to Rav Shach and he says, listen, Mrs. So-and-so has passed away. I don't know who it is. I'm just relating the message that I was told. She passed away. Rav Shach hears her name and you see his face, like turning white, and he says, Baruch Dayan Emet. He says, get up, we have to go to the funeral. He says, what? Who is this lady? What are you talking about? Rav Shach, you're older. It was a freezing cold winter day in Israel, in Yerushalayim. And he says that, no, we need to go. This was a nice drive of about an hour, and the freezing cold weather for a man in his 90s, it's very difficult to go. He says, we have to go. Please, who is this? Who is this woman? You don't attend to many meetings because you're so sick. Why do you want to go to this lady's funeral? We have to go. And he's deep in thought. He goes, sits in the car. The guy, the shamish, the attendant, the entire time trying to convince him not to go. They sit in the car, and the entire time, the entire ride, he's in deep thought, just thinking away. The attendant knows not to ask him any questions. He saw that he was very serious. He had tears in his eyes. They get to the funeral. They're barely a minyan, barely of 10 people that were at this funeral. They get out, and it was a slushy, freezing rain coming down. It was a quick funeral, no speeches. They just buried the body. Everyone runs back to their car. Rav Shach tells the attendant, I need to stand here for a few minutes. Please, let me be. The guy tries everything in his ability. What are you doing, Rav Shach? With all respect, your health is on the line, your life is on the line. Why do you want to stand in the freezing cold rain? He says, no, I need to do this. Please go in the car and give me some time to peace and quiet to think about it. He stands there 5 to 10 minutes in this freezing cold rain, and he's soaking wet. He comes back slowly to the car. He takes off his coat. It was soaking wet. The attendant gives him another coat. And on the drive back, he tells the attendant, now I could tell you the story. He says, back when I was younger, I was 13, I was accepted to yeshiva of Iluyim, of geniuses. Back then, not everybody went to yeshivas. Only the people that were very serious, the people that were, very smart, they had the privilege to go to yeshiva. He went to yeshiva, and since he was the newcomer, a lot of the older boys, the people that were there longer, they got the beds, whatever these days would not consider a bed. They had like a small little mat that they used on some, they slept on the floor. And since he was new, they didn't have any beds. He had to sleep on the bench in the Beit Midrash, a wooden bench, hard, cold. The only thing they had to give him is a sheet, no blanket, and no pillow. So he stuck it out for several weeks in the beginning, Elul, September, October time. Fine. He was able to last. The yeshiva was fine. He was able to learn. Once winter kicked in, it got unbearable. Freezing cold. He doesn't have a blanket, and he's sleeping on the bench of the Beit Midrash. He decided at that point, he had an uncle that was a blacksmith, and the uncle was in touch with him, that he decided that after a week, it's just unbearable. He can't handle the sleeping, the freezing cold on a wooden bench. He decided that he's going to leave yeshiva for good, and he's going to join his uncle in the blacksmith business. Few days after his decision, and he sent a telegram to his uncle that he's joining him, a lady came to the yeshiva, that a tragedy happened. Although her husband was younger, her husband passed away. They had a fabric business. They had several blankets and pillows and other things that they wanted to donate to the yeshiva. They donated these blankets, and Rav Shach was lucky. This boy, Elazar, was able to get one of these blankets. He says that night he had a blanket, he was able to sleep better. Second night was also good, and what was unbearable before became a little bit bearable. He pushed off going to his uncle a week became 2 weeks, 2 weeks became a month became a year, and he ended up staying. The rest is history. He became the greatest sage in the past 100 years, Rav Shach. So the uncle said, the shamish attendant said, I understand, you owe this lady a tremendous debt of gratitude, but why did you go stand in the freezing cold rain? You're putting your health on the line, and you're risking your health. What are you doing? He said, I wanted to feel that exact same feeling I had when I was in yeshiva, those freezing cold nights, where I couldn't sleep. It was unbearable. What this lady did for me, this lady saved my life. I wanted to feel that cold, bitter shaking of the bones, the same way that I felt back then. And this is the Hakar Tov, the debt of gratitude I owe this lady. This was Rav Shach's sense of Hakar Tov, debt of gratitude. I think this is the answer here. People think, debt of gratitude, Hakar Tov. You don't realize the Torah's perspective. I'll talk for another few minutes on the Torah's perspective of debt of gratitude, how much we owe somebody who does us good, who does something good for us. And this is the extent Rav Shach was willing to risk his life, even just to feel, so that he could have the proper debt of gratitude to this woman. This is explanation by Moshe Rabbeinu also. Everything's on the line. 3 million men, women, and children. You have the opportunity to hit it big, to hit the jackpot. This is the $500 million lottery over here. The merit, the spiritual merit of saving these Jews, they're willing to give it all up. Give up being the greatest prophet in history. Willing to give up the opportunity to take these Jews to reach Har Sinai. Oh, why? I owe my life to my father-in-law. He opened his house to me. It's not proper. It's a lack of hakarat tov, lack of gratitude if I don't go ask permission. And if you would say no, what can I do? It's a brick wall. I'll continue living my life as a simple shepherd. This is an unbelievable concept of hakarat tov. With this understanding, I think we could explain a different section that we say over on the night of Passover. You're going to be saying this Friday night. We discussed the different plagues. The 10 plagues that God brought upon the Egyptians. Now, who brought the plagues upon the Egyptians? Obviously God, but who was the middleman to bring the plagues upon the Egyptians? Who? Moshe and Aaron. Good. Who was what? Which plagues were Moshe? Which plagues were Aaron?
Moshe didn't do the blood, right? For the sin.
Good. For sure, blood, the first one. And what else?
Keening the sin, I think.
Good, sin. And what about the second one, the frogs? It's also. The first three were not through Moshe, it was through Aaron. God commands Moshe, tell Aaron, take your stick, hit the water. Hit the Nile. Take your stick, hit the ground. Hit the dirt. Now, why Aaron? Why not Moshe? Moshe did the last 7. What's the difference? Rashi says one line. Because the Nile River protected Moshe when Moshe was a little baby and he was crying away in his little basket and he floating right along in the Nile. Who protected Moshe? It was the Nile. He didn't drown. He owed the river a debt of gratitude. He couldn't be the one hitting the river. It's not nice. Similarly with the dirt, when Moshe killed the Egyptian was beating up the Jew, and Moshe saw through prophecy that this Egyptian had committed adultery. He was deserving of a death sentence. He said the name of God, the name of Hashem, poof, on the spot the Egyptian dies. Moshe would have been in big trouble had the ground swallowed up the Egyptian. Says the Torah that Moshe, you can't be the one to hit the ground because the ground saved your life. Now, if you think about this sounds ridiculous. It's one thing that you owe debt of gratitude to someone does you a favor. Someone gives you blankets. Someone gives you a ride. Someone helps you. You owe them a debt of gratitude. They did something good for you. You have to show your appreciation to that person, to let them know that you're thankful. You're not an ingrate. What in the world does that have to do with over here? These are inanimate objects. This is a river. This is dirt. It's one thing if you have a dog. The dog does you good, It makes you happy, it does tricks for you. Something about dogs, apparently that entire LA is so crazy over them, clearly. So it does something, it makes you happy. So you throw them a bone, a debt of gratitude. You owe a debt of gratitude to your dog. Would it make any sense if, you came home one day, you were angry, you ran inside and you slammed the door shut. Your wife says, whoa, calm down. What are you doing to the door? You know what that door did for you? When it's freezing cold outside, it keeps you warm. When it's hot outside, it keeps you cool with the air conditioner running. The door saved you from a lot of robbers. Are you kidding me? You're going to slam the door like that? You tell the guy, you need to get some help. You need to see a psychologist. You have major issues, no? So what does it have to do over here? Moshe Rabbeinu had to have a debt of gratitude. He can't hit the ground. Anyone ever think about this? We've been hearing this since we were in first grade. Oh, it's nice and dandy. He couldn't hit the Nile because the Nile saved his life. He couldn't hit the dirt because the dirt saved his life. Makes no sense. Rav Pam Zatzal writes that apparently Hakarat Tov, a debt of gratitude, is not only for the recipient receiving the good, to realize that you're thankful and you appreciate what has been done for what he did for you. That's not the only reason Hakarat Tov. Hakarat Tov is something for you. That if you are the recipient of some good, you have to feel a debt of gratitude. You have to be thankful. And even if it is inanimate, you still have to be thankful. You know what a good example of this? I always thought my father was a little bit off. Like, what is he talking about? I realized after years of yeshiva that he's right. 10 years ago, when I started dating, 11 years ago, my father, he had a Toyota 4Runner that he bought in 1998, and this is going back 10, 11 years ago, so the car was whatever, 8 years old, and I needed a car for dating. So he gave me his car, he shipped his car to New York, and pick up the car. My father would come visit with my mother, once a year, maybe twice a year. They would come whenever they had a chance. Every single time he would come to New York, he would say, the car, please, take good care of it. Make sure you change the oil every 3 months. It really did me good. It never gave me any problems. It was always there for me. It took me any places I need to go without any issues. It's a really good car. Take care of it. I think, Dad, it's just a car. Calm down. Why are you making a big deal about a car? And I see that he's right. It's not just a car. It's something that you have to show, not for the car. The car is inanimate. The car is dead. You have to show debt of gratitude for you to become a person who's appreciative of the blessings you have in your life. You have to be thankful. There's a concept of hakar tov, even things that are not animate. Now, this trait is so crucial in life. This is one of the most important traits in life for a person to develop happiness. People looking for all sorts of secrets, how to become happy in life. All sorts of drugs and all sorts of goodies to somehow be happy, find a sense of fulfillment in life. I saw in one of the Musar books that they write that people think that happiness is dependent on external factors. If business is going well and I'm making a lot of money, I'll be happy. If I get good grades, I'll be happy. If I get accepted to that medical school, I'll be happy. Everything external. If I have health, I'll be happy. This book writes that nothing further than the truth. True happiness comes from one's perspective of appreciating and being thankful for the blessings in your life. And then I saw a quote in Rav Pam. I love this quote, this line. It says, "Where is the city of happiness? Where is the city of happiness? It's in the state of mind." It's in the state of mind. It's your perspective in life. How you view life.
The Mishnah said, "Ezu Sameach."
As the Ashir Hasamech B'Chalko. Very good. That is, I think this is one of the keys to being happy in life. We take things for granted. We take things, you get used to things. They asked Rav Yecheskel Levenstein, why is it so hard to show Hakar Tov and to feel a sense of gratitude? He says because we get used to things. The koach of hergel. We get used to things. We get used to having our blessings, our health, our wealth, our house, our car. You feel that this is an entitlement, a sense of entitlement. I'm supposed to have this. I'm supposed to be walking. I'm supposed to be healthy. I'm supposed to have a healthy heart. It only takes one visit to a friend or somebody in the hospital. Unfortunately, I had to pay a visit to one of my friends a couple years ago. Lo aleinu, he had cancer. You walk through this hospital and see cancer patient after cancer patient and what type of life they have. And you start appreciating a little bit of a wake-up call. A person needs to focus. I promise you, if you don't focus and refocus on this, on the blessings in your life, you'll take everything for granted. And you become such an ungrateful person. The key to happiness is for a person to feel the gratitude, feel the brachas they have in their life, the blessings they have in their life. This is so important in everything in life, in happiness in life, and your overall, relationships with people. There's a fascinating Gemara. The Gemara writes about Rav Chia. You probably heard this before. Rav Chia, inevitably, any Shalom Bayit class you go to, I'll give you an early preview of Shalom Bayit. It says that Rav Chia, he had a wife who, how shall we put this? She did everything in her power to make his life a living Gehenna. This was his wife. This type of relationship they had. Everything he wanted, she did the opposite. Everything he asked for, she did something different. Now, he did something interesting. Every time he went to the shuk, to this market, he found some type of gadget, some chocolates, some flowers, some toy, and he would buy it and bring it to his wife. And he would say, "Oh, here, honey, I'll buy you something." Now, his nephew saw his practice, and his nephew came over to him and he says, "Uncle, with all respect, what are you doing? A rabbi on your caliber is one thing. You're not divorcing this woman. Now, you go out of your way to buy her things? What are you doing?" He responds with one line. He says, "Dai lanu shemagadelet et banenu." It's enough for me, the fact that she's raising my children, and she's saving me from sin. This is his response. I owe her my life because she's raising my children and saving me from sin. If you think about this, the concept of her raising the children, her raising her children, she's not doing it for him necessarily. There's a natural maternal love that every woman has for their children. She was doing it probably for herself. If she's that type of woman who can't stand her husband and does everything against his will, she's doing it for herself. She's not doing it for him. And the concept of saving him from sin, I assume they didn't have the best relationship in the world. The fact that he's married, that he's already a taken man, and it prevented him from any thoughts of sin. And just for this, he feels that it's enough. I owe her my life. The fact that she's doing all this crazy things she's doing for me, I debt of gratitude. Can you imagine? No one would think that way. It's very important in life, in marriage. People want to have a happy marriage. The wife does a lot of things. A man who does not appreciate it, this is her job. She has to raise the kids. What do you mean? That's her job. This is what you've been hearing since you were younger. A woman has to raise the kids. A woman has to cook. And a woman she's in charge of the house. This is what she's supposed to do. Just because she's supposed to do it, even if it is true, doesn't mean that you shouldn't show hakar tov, you shouldn't show debt of gratitude. A husband, a man is supposed to work. That's his job. He's supposed to support the family. But that doesn't mean the woman, the wife, should not show debt of gratitude and be thankful for it. This is the key to to having a healthy marriage relationship. The gratitude towards one's in-laws. You guys are not there yet, but hopefully one day. Sometimes in-laws are very hard to deal with. Just the concept of so many marriages falling apart because not knowing how to deal with the in-laws. If a person had the perspective of Moshe Rabbeinu, I owe my life, it wouldn't work that way. You wouldn't get run into so many problems. And they talk about this is the greatest, the underlying reason behind the mitzvah of kibud av v'em, respecting your parents. This is very relevant to you, especially now. Parents, you find, as I studied in yeshiva for many years, one of the most severe commandments in our Torah is honoring and respecting one's parents. You find in the Gemara, give examples of to what extent people owe their lives to their parents. It's unimaginable. You had one of the big rabbis who was a huge rabbi, and his mother was older. She couldn't get on top of the bed. Every night when she needed to get on top of the bed, I guess they couldn't afford a stool, they didn't have a stool, he would bend down on all four, bend down all the way down and lay on the floor. She would step on his back and climb on the bed. She needed to get up in the morning, he'd do the same thing. Middle of the night, she needed to go to the bathroom, same thing. This was his job. I have to come be there for the Shekhinah. This is my mother. How can I not be there? You find the halacha that normally if you hit somebody, let's say someone strikes someone and they make a wound, you scratch them, you make a wound of some sort. You have to pay them the damages, the doctor's fee, and if they miss work, whatever, comes a couple $100, $1,000. What happens if someone hits their parent and makes a scratch and makes them bleed a little bit? You're chayv mita. It's a death penalty. Like, whoa, death penalty, calm down, God. If someone curses someone out in God's name, you curse them out using God's name. So maybe the guy gets lashes. If you curse out your parents with God's name, you get the worst type of death penalty. You know what the underlying reason behind the severity, the strictness, the stringency of this mitzvah is all because of hakar tov. How could you be ungrateful for everything that your parents did for you? Parents go through Gehenna raising their children. My parents, I think back, they left their whole life in Iran just so that we don't have to be, serving in the army. A person owes their life. Not like your typical teenager things like I talked about last week. Another guy I was talking to, I remember, the guy, his mother wanted to do something for him. And he said, no, I don't want my mother to do it for me. Why? Because then I'll feel indebted to her. I said, you're 16 years too late, you ingrate. Now I'm going to feel indebted to her. Who do you think you are? What do you think she, what Gehenna she went through to raise you? The ultimate kibbut av v'em, the underlying reason behind the mitzvah is hakar tov, recognizing the good, being grateful. Parents could be annoying at sometimes, sometimes or a lot of times, especially around this time before Pesach. You talk about stressful period. You talk about the Passover Seder. People come in so tired, so stressed out. It's so important to keep in mind during this week when your parents are driving you crazy about cleaning, about different things, that I owe my life to my parents. This is what Passover is all about. Hakar tov, being grateful. How can I not be there? Sometimes they push it a little bit too much, but you have to be understanding. You have to be aware of what Hakarat Tov is. You know, there was a study done, the highest percentage of unhappy and depressed people, they found out were the rich. But why? Because they take everything as a given. They don't appreciate anything they get. There's a certain sense of entitlement. I kind of appreciate the fact that when I grew up, we didn't have so much money. My parents had to work 2 jobs, they had a hard time. But that it was hard back then, but now I grow up, I see that I appreciate things. I take little things, they mean a lot. And I know I'm careful with the money. You're not cheap, but like you're careful, you value things much more because it's not coming to you, it's not given to you on a silver platter. And ultimately, the ultimate Hakarat Tov obviously is to God. You know, you find all the sections of Birchat HaShachar from the time you wake up in the morning. Thank you, God, for allowing me to wake up. Thank you, God, for giving me the ability to walk, the ability to talk. Every single blessing, every single bracha is thanking God. What are we doing? It's the entire focus is being thankful, be grateful. If a person really focused on this, you'd be a much happier person. I have to be thankful for this, not to take it for granted. All the sections of the prayers. You talk about, you know, in Shemona Esrei. The first part of Shemona Esrei, the first bracha, is clearly the most important bracha in the Shemona Esrei. What's the second most important part of the Shemona Esrei? Modim. Now, very good. What's Modim? Modim anachnu lach. God, thank you for everything you did for us. In a whole paragraph. You ever noticed that during the Chazara, the repetition of Shemona Esrei, there's only one part of the Shemona Esrei that you have to say yourself, you can't be Yotze with the Shleach Tzibur. All the other parts, there's no additions, and you just listen to him, and you fulfill your obligation. Why, all of a sudden, by Modim, you have to stop everything? Every single Jew in the shul has to stand up, and they bow down, Modim. You know why? Because you can't be Yotze, fulfill your obligation of gratitude to someone else. You have to be the one showing the gratitude to God, thanking God. And this, you find this concept, this theme over and over again in the Pesach Seder. How many times do you see the words, Hodu l'Adonai ki tov ki l'olam chasdo? I praise God, ki l'olam chasdo. His kindness is eternal, is forever. How many times do you see that line? 20, 30 times. The whole entire section of Dayenu, you know, the people, everyone's favorite part, especially for Persians, of the Passover night is Dayenu. You're whipping out the scallions, or some people sticks, some people forks, I don't know, whatever people use, some people bats. You know, it's not all about causing wounds and, you know, having a good time, the Dayenu. What is the whole entire section of Dayenu? If God would have just brought us out of Mitzrayim, even if He didn't do anything for us, Dayenu would have been enough for us. Everything, it would have been enough. We're still thankful, just the bare minimum. You see this theme over and over and over again. It is the theme of this religion. Do we have time to conclude with one last story? And I'll finish with this. This is a story. I saw this story, fascinating, amazing story. I'll try to cut it short, hours late. There are 2 ladies, 2 girls, who went on a trip from America to Eretz Yisrael, to Yerushalayim, and they were there for 2 weeks. This is going back on August 9th, 2001, this story. And they were around Yerushalayim. They wanted to go into a restaurant to get some food to eat and go take care of other stuff they had to take care of. They walk into a restaurant and they see that the restaurant was packed. Packed, no seat to sit in. The waiter comes over and the lady says, listen, there's no room to sit now. I highly advise, it's not worth waiting. You're going to have to wait at least 20, 30 minutes. Go take care of your other errands and come back in an hour. It should be empty out in an hour. Sure enough, they take off. 15 minutes later, these 2 girls that are walking the streets of Yerushalayim, they hear a loud explosion. This was none other than the explosion, the Sparrow restaurant bombing, if anyone remembers, you're probably much younger back then, where hundreds of people were hurt, many people died from a bombing in Sparrow. And these 2 ladies would have been in there had not for this lady, this waitress, telling them to leave. Now, once they found out about this, they were really shaken up. They wanted to find out, this lady, this waitress, is a messenger from God, sent from heaven to save their life. We have to go and thank her. They found out that, Baruch Hashem, she was alive, but she was really severely wounded, and the heat of the explosions She had a lot of scars all over her face. They found out that she was taken to a certain hospital, and after several days, they figured they could go visit her. They went to visit her, and they thanked her profusely. They said, we owe our life to you. Thank you so much. They said, here's our number. Whenever or anytime you need anything in America, please let us know. We'll be there for you. This lady, Israeli woman, says, okay, thank you. And they go on with their life. Several weeks later, they get a call when they came back to New York from this lady. And this lady said, listen, I need your help a little bit. I don't have any family in New York. But the doctors here recommended that since I need several surgeries in my face in order not to have horrible scars from the explosion, I need to come to the plastic surgeons in New York or somewhere around there. Can I please stay by you and please give me a little bit of help and pointers of how to get around New York? They said, yeah, for sure, no problem. We'll pick you up. So these two ladies talked it over and discussed it. And they said, listen, we owe our life to this woman. Hakar Tatov. We're going to make it our business. We're going to take off work. They took off work for one day when she was coming in, and they did the research. They found out that the best doctor was none other than Baltimore. It's a good 4.5 hour drive from New York to go down to Baltimore. And they say this is the best plastic surgeon you could have. We found out, and they called her and said we made an appointment, and they had already taken off a day. She said, no, it's okay. I'll find my own ride. We won't hear of it. They took off that day to drive her. Drove her all the way down to Baltimore for this meeting. That day was none other than September 11th, 2001. These two ladies worked in the Twin Towers. And this is a story that's recorded. This is a true story. They were working in the Twin Towers, all because of debt of gratitude, a hakar tov to this woman, and they went out of their way because they felt that they owed their life to her. Their lives were saved in that Twin Tower hit. They worked on the higher floors in Twin Towers. Chances are they would not be around today to speak this out. Second time?
Yeah, because the bomb.
Second time. Yeah. That's the power of hakar tov. We talk about gratitude, how far it goes. This Pesach, we should keep this in mind this week and hopefully Passover night when you're sitting around your families, count your blessings and count all the bracha you have in your life. This is the source of happiness, source of everything, and this is the Torah's perspective of hakar tov. Even Moshe Rabbeinu, willing to give everything up in the books, everything in his life, give it all up. Why? I owe my life to my father-in-law, hakar tov. Hashem should help us that we should have this trait with us. And as Rav Aaron Feldman, by the way, says, he says the most important trait, midah, for a Jew to have in life is to be makir tov, to have hakar tov, because everything stems from hakar tov. A person has the proper perspective with God, the sense of hakar tov, debt of gratitude, you wouldn't do anything wrong, and you would always be there to try to serve God properly. Hashem should help us. We should always be makir tov to everybody.